I have heard some powerful voices argue that the coalition should open a political front against the Labor Party on the issue of domestic national security. I could not disagree more strongly. One of the main reasons why the government has earned the confidence of the public on national security policy is that there has never been a credible suggestion that political motives have intruded.
George Brandis was the last Attorney-General to have full responsibility for the Australian Security and Intelligence Organisation before Malcolm Turnbull's sweeping reforms moved ASIO to Home Affairs. In his farewell speech to the Senate, Brandis criticised his own party for using anti-terrorism laws as a political weapon.
Nothing could be more irresponsible than to hazard the safety of the public by creating a confected dispute for political advantage.
Yet, in the past week, the government's been trying to use national security for political advantage, weaponising comments by the head of ASIO, seeking to create the appearance of divisions on national security, and using increasingly inflammatory language to suggest that Labor's leadership is variously the preferred candidate of the Chinese Communist Party or even the Manchurian candidate.
I don't believe that anything is confected in terms of the actions of the government. What the government has sought to do at each and every step, Senator Keneally, is legislate the type of reforms I was talking about before.
So you believe phrases like Manchurian candidate is not politicising national security?
Senator, having debates that highlight the differences in what people have said, the differences in track record of parties, and the leadership that the government has shown. These are all legitimate, fair, Senator.
But in an extraordinary series of developments, the national security establishment is fighting back.
The foreign interference is against all members of Parliament, so it doesn't go after one particular party or the other.
Well, it can't make your job any easier when politicians do politicise it.
So I'll leave the politics to the politicians, but I'm very clear with everyone that I need to be that that's not helpful for us.
This was a rare intervention by the head of ASIO, but while Mike Burgess may have been pointed, he was still clearly being careful with his words. One of his predecessors, Dennis Richardson, was more forthright this morning.
Seeking to create the perception of a difference where none in practice exists for straight-out party political purposes is something that we've not seen an Australian government do for decades, and it does not serve the national interest by any objective standard. It, in effect, only serves the interests of one country, and that is China.
And there was more.
I believe that Australia's national resilience is an important contributor to our overall defence posture. And national resilience depends on national unity to a certain extent.
So our most senior national security officials are warning that trying to create perceptions of division in Australia, as an increasingly desperate government is now doing, only serves the interests of others. But even this most crucial warning is being politicised.
I don't want to live in an Australia where we can't debate certain things because our spy chiefs tell us not to. I think they also need to be careful not to interfere in what's properly the domain of political debate and elected representatives.
Canberra, around the Soviet embassy, unfolds an incredible story that has made world headlines.
ASIO finds itself dragged into the political fray as it was in the 1950s.
The Royal Commission on Espionage would last 11 months.
When the Menzies government exploited the defection of Soviet diplomat Vladimir Petrov to set up what we would now call a national security election in 1954.
A big swing against the Labor government has taken place.
Unlike the 1950s and the fear of just one foreign player, the old Soviet Union, Mike Burgess pointed out last night that there are multiple foreign players at work now.
Sometimes we get friends with sharp elbows and rapacious intelligence requirements who seek to gain information and covertly influence foreign interference in our country and our politicians.
That ASIO's warning goes not just to foreign players, but to a deteriorating domestic cohesion, should be all the more reason for politicians to be acting more responsibly, at a time when ASIO is warning of a disturbing rise in nationalism and racist violent extremism.
ASIO is not interested in protest and dissent. That's lawful in this country. The protest we saw in Canberra last week, for example, the vast majority of that was peaceful, but sadly there are a small number of individuals that do act, think and plan and will go to violence, and the most likely terrorist attack in Australia will continues to be the actions of an individual or a group of individuals that will motivate to violence with little or no warning.
Laura Tingle joins me now from Canberra. Laura, I gather that Dave Sharma, the MP we saw in your package, isn't the only member of the government jumping on national security figures.
That's right, Lee. Later this afternoon, Senator James Paterson, who's the chair of the Joint Intelligence and Security Committee, also weighed in. He basically said that the comments by Mike Burgess had been overinterpreted, which is interesting given a lot of this debate started when you could argue that Mike Burgess's comments in a speech last week had been overinterpreted by the Defence Minister Peter Dutton. But he then also launched into a fairly extraordinary spray at one of Australia's most senior bureaucrats over a very long time, Dennis Richardson, who we also saw in the package, a former head of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, of Defence, a former head of ASIO and an ambassador to the United States under the Howard government, and essentially implied that Dennis Richardson had sort of a problem on his hands because he had lobbied on behalf of Huawei after Huawei had given his football club a sponsorship deal.
Laura Tingle, on another matter, we saw two Liberal MPs, Bridget Archer, she's the Tasmanian MP who last week crossed the floor on the religious discrimination bill, plus the retiring MP John Alexander, hold a press conference with the crossbench calling for a debate on a National Integrity Commission. Now, the independent MP Helen Haines has put up her own proposal for an Integrity Commission. Why couldn't the Haines bloc have just pushed for her bill to be debated this week if there were at least two government MPs who might have supported it?
Well, this is, interestingly, it goes back to a story we covered a couple of weeks ago. Essentially, you need an absolute majority to get a crossbench piece of legislation onto to be debated. Because of pairs, because of COVID and border closures, that just wasn't possible. But the speculation has to be whether if Helen Haines and the crossbench had just one of those MPs supporting her legislation, it would have actually got through. So it does leave it very clear that it's a very close thing for the next Parliament.
Laura, thanks very much.
Thanks, Lee.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.